So, how's all my internet friends doing tonight? Me, I'm the same, you know, frustrated as ever because I found out that James Comey, former FBI director, has been indicted for a second time. And this time is because of seashells. Yeah, seashells. When he arranged them in the order of 8647. Okay. Now, anyone who has gone to the bars, worked in a bar, worked in a restaurant, worked in any place that's kind of customer service oriented, mostly in the food industry. The term 86 means to, especially in bars, to kick someone out. When the bartender or a bouncer tells you that you're 86th, that means you are no longer allowed at that establishment. And of course, in the restaurant industry, 86, the special, 86, the meatloaf, that means the meatloaf is all gone. The special is gone. There's no more left. So there's that. Now, the next thing having to deal with that is the fact that this is an indictment of free speech. Okay. When he or whoever it was arranged those seashells on the beach, 8647, that was that person's that person exercising their First Amendment right of free speech, freedom of expression. That's what that was. And to indict someone for that is an indictment of the First Amendment. Now, I'm no lawyer, didn't go to law school, but I can tell you, using critical thinking, in other words, logic, anyone who watched Star Trek knows all about logic, okay? That was Mr. Spock's thing. It is not logical. And for them to indict him for this is not logical. And forget the slippery slope being on it, okay? We are sliding down it, okay, to authoritarianism. And this has got to stop. And we all know it, okay? And then when you have, your far right wing nuts, saying, oh, the left needs to turn down the rhetoric, okay, lower the temperature. Well, maybe they should first. And why do I say that? Well, because they're the ones that fired the first shot across the bow. They are allowed to whine and cry and say, oh, you're trying to cancel me and you're blah, 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 whatever bullshit they're talking about. Okay. But the minute that someone on the left says, you know what you said is wrong, and what you're doing is violation of my free speech, what you're doing is violation of my right to religion, okay? What's good for the goose is good for the gander, and that's an expression that has been around since I was a wee lass, and I'm not even Scottish, so they're talking about turning down the rhetoric, take down, stop with the rhetoric. Maybe they should practice what they preach. And, I'll tell you something else. Their hypocrisy knows no bounds. And every time, and they don't ever think of this, and if they do think of it, they just sort of ignore it. But every time they're pointing a finger, they're pointing three back at themselves. So this is ridiculous, and it's got to stop. You know, and now we have all of these different videos that I've seen about people who voted for Trump 3 times. Three. Okay. They voted for him in 2016. They voted for him in 2020. And then they voted for him again in 2024. And in 2016, he started a trade war with China, okay, which caused farmers' costs to go up, which meant that they weren't making any money. And a lot of farms ended up in foreclosure during Trump's first term. And, you know, I can feel bad for them because that's their livelihood. But here they are bitching and moaning about losing the business. And they voted for Trump in 2016. And then they voted for him again in 2024 when he retook the Oval Office. And then Trump started a trade war with the whole world practically. Now, there were countries that did manage to um, skate on the tariffs, Vietnam being one of them. And this is how Vietnam did it. They learned Trump to learn, excuse me, they learned to speak Trump's language, which is money and property. And they told him, hey, you can build a hotel here in Vietnam and you won't have to go through the regular vetting process or however it goes to build your hotel. Vietnam didn't get tariffed. Now, as I said in an earlier video, tariffs cannot be placed on another country unilaterally by the president. That is a job of Congress. So then the next thing we hear, the farmers whining and crying again about how they're losing all kinds of money. They weren't able to sell any soybeans to China, and China was the number one buyer of soybeans. And then we have cattle ranchers saying how they can't sell their product. And what did Trump do? He made a deal with Argentina. Okay. Plus, he gave them what, $20 million? I think it was something around that figure. So he makes a deal with Argentina, gives them money, and now we're apparently going to be getting beef from Argentina, a country that doesn't have the same uh, Food and Drug Administration checks that we do. So we could end up getting beef in our food chain that could probably, you know, make us sick. Mad cow. And every time I think of mad cow's disease, I think of the show um, Boston Legal, where Denny Crane was diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's. And instead of saying he had that condition, he called it mad cow disease, which the symptoms are kind of the same. But that's a story for another day. And so now we have these Republicans that are boo-hooing, writing their, recording their apology videos. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to vote for Trump. I meant to vote for Trump, but I didn't vote for this. Yeah, you did. Okay. You knew what he was all about when you cast that ballot. You knew it. You saw it. You lived through it. And now that these executive orders and things that the Republican Congress is doing are affecting you, you're crying about it. And you voted for it. You voted for Trump. You voted Republican. And the truth of the matter is that voting Republican You're voting against your own interests. If you're voting Republican, you're voting for the interests of big pharma, big oil, big tech. That's who you're vote. That's whose interest you're voting for. Okay, you're not voting for the interest of the, the regular folk. So you're getting exactly what you voted for. Now, okay, so you're apologizing. You feel bad. You did this thing that you're regretting now. You voted for Trump and now you're regretting your vote. I just have one question for you. Have you learned anything? Did you learn anything? Has this lesson stuck? Because if you did, okay, then okay, welcome aboard. It's a big tent. There's a lot of room under this tent. When you go to the ballot box, okay, make sure you're voting for your interests, for the good that politicians can do, not for the bad that politicians can do. And they can do a lot of bad, okay? Joe Biden got prescription drug prices down for like insulin to a manageable price. And then as soon as Trump got back in the Oval Office, he undid that. Okay, so now diabetics are paying a higher cost. Just remember something. You reap what you sow. Now, if you learn something, good for you. Keep learning. That's what makes us human. We learn. We make mistakes and we learn from those mistakes. But if you're not learning from those mistakes, well, you're just going to make them again and again and again. And the definition of insanity is making the same mistake repeatedly and expecting a different result. It doesn't work that way. It never has. So, if you really want to blame somebody, okay, blame people like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg. Blame them, okay? And look in the mirror and blame that person that you see in the mirror every day and learn not to make the same mistake again because we have the power to fix this and it must be fixed. So, there was my nightly rant. I record at night because, I'm kind of nocturnal. But I hope you got something out of it. And if you didn't, I'll try to improve. And I'm going to end this video now because I'm pretty sure you're tired of hearing my rant and my voice is kind of going away. So, good night, America, wherever you are. And please take care of yourself.